At the center of our love I stand, and from that center I, the soul, will outward move. From that center I, the one who serves, will work. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group and throughout the world. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group and throughout the world. At the center of our love I stand.
Good evening, everyone. This is Michael, and I'll be substituting for Tuya tonight and really most of the week this coming week. Just want to remind you, you know that Francis Donald is giving his monthly program on the Secret Doctrine tonight in another couple of hours, 8 o'clock GMT, and it's a very rich presentation on an indispensable book. It's a webinar, and you should have received notification of it. And if you have not, just write to, I'll try to handle it, write to me, infinitize8@gmail.com, or to Joe Waltz or to B.L. Allison. Hopefully you have one of those addresses, and we'll try to provide you right away with the link. I can't put it, unfortunately, in the box here on YouTube. They won't allow me to use that kind of link. Well, okay. DK has some preliminary thoughts for us, and I'll just review them quickly. You know, this is, in many ways, the crux of the whole problem. There's so much money spent on so many things which are so non-essential, and it seems, unfortunately, like, at times anyway, that humanity does not have time to support or inclination to support that which is truly essential. The most important thing happening on our planet right now is the externalization of the hierarchy and the reappearance of the Christ. Humanity is threatened by many problems, and they grow more dire by the day. They're largely well, not only international and having to do with right international relations and all of the weaponry we have that could set us back to the beginning, but the ecological problem, the extinction of the animals, the extinction of the bees, the drying up, or should we say, of life within the oceans. There's a lot of dead space now, the garbage that's going into the oceans, and just the possible disruption in the links between the animals upon which humanity depends. There are just many, many things. It's all related to climate change, and there's much that we can do. It's also related to the initiation that we're passing through on our planet, a very demanding fourth type of initiation, and there will be suffering, of course. David Attenborough, you know about him, and he's a great naturalist and commentator, and he worries about the continuation of humanity, the way things are going. So we will be faced with difficulties, big ones, before humanity emerges into the Aquarian age, and even then it's not going to be easy, because we're going into the Saturn decanate of the Aquarian age, and difficulty is promised. So we know a little something about the esoteric approaches and how we can stand behind, with words of power, the great invocation, and all three great invocations really, and combat this myopia, this short-sightedness within humanity. We do have to distribute the great invocation widely, continuously. And he says it will take sacrifice, it will take the expenditure of money, and people have to be alerted to the problems of humanity and to begin to think in those terms. We have a book on that subject, but we also have an extension of it written maybe 40 years later by Jan Nation, as she revised it and added some of the more current problems, and now this whole question of climate change occurring much more rapidly than we imagined. And we have to think from the Bible that none are so blind as those who will not see, those who refuse to see. So we have to raise human consciousness so that it can begin to see. Well, in any case, every Sunday morning we try to do this meditation. It is here in Finland. It is night, but it doesn't make any difference. We're all together in this wherever we are in the world, and basically we take what we have saved during the previous week, or what we intended to give to that which carries forward the work of the hierarchy and the Christ, and we dedicate it in meditation to the Christ. I have a few things to read here, and it's about the Christ consciousness and maybe, the resistance of the selfish part of our nature to that which could be much more far-seeing, much more insightful. This developing Christ consciousness, says the Tibetan, in the masses of men everywhere, will create necessarily a ferment in the daily life of peoples everywhere. The life of the personality, oriented hitherto to the attaining of material and purely selfish ends, will be at war with the new and inner realization. After all, we are a member of the fourth kingdom of nature, and in that kingdom, conflict and war precedes the peace and the harmony which are due. The carnal man, to use the words of Paul the initiate, when he was the initiate, right, will be battling the spiritual man, each seeking to achieve control. And I'm sure that we have experienced this in our life, the conflict between what's known as the vertical pairs of opposites. In the early stages after the birth of the Christ in the heart, the first initiation, and during the infancy of the Christ child, again speaking in symbols, the material aspect is triumphant, and even the disciplines to which people around the time of the first initiation submit themselves, they are the physical disciplines, celibacy, what shall one eat, how shall one sleep, how shall one handle physical plane life. All of that is necessary, but of course, if prolonged overmuch, then it does not allow us to treat the higher vehicles also in a careful and disciplined manner. Later, the Christ life triumphs. Maybe by the time of the third initiation, the fourth, the fifth, from that time on, there is the triumph of the love wisdom of the soul, regardless of the ray, within our nature. And as he said, this we well know, this you well know. Each initiation indicates a stage in the growth and the development of this new factor in the human consciousness and expression. And this continues until the third initiation, and then it takes a leap, and really the Christ life can blossom, and the true spirit man, the monad, begins to have an effect, and people learn the art of identification or of being one with the human beings they perceive. And the great heresy of separateness begins to fade away. Okay, those are my comments. Then the Tibetan goes on, and when there, at that time, the third initiation, when there emerges the full-grown man in Christ, or at least, let's say, the mature man, and by the time the fifth initiation is taken, then we have a true member of the hierarchy. And we might say, really fully grown. The initiate is then ready at the fifth initiation to register, realize, and record the long-awaited revelation. And what is that fifth initiation called? It's called the initiation of revelation. It's not resurrection. Resurrection comes later, interestingly. The true resurrection, that is. In connection with the individual and the first initiation, the seventh ray is always active. This is an economical ray. This is a ray related to money and to finance, along with the third ray. So the seventh ray is always active, and the man is enabled consciously to register the fact of initiation, because either the brain or the mind, and frequently both, note that, frequently both the brain and the mind are controlled by the seventh ray. And that's a very, we would think, an unusual ray combination, but it's necessary to really anchor the Christ life to some degree within the brain and upon the physical plane. The Tibetan goes on, it is this fact which is of importance today in connection with humanity, for it will enable mankind to pass through the door, admitting them to the first initiatory process. And when that starts to come, there will be sharing. We're told that the Christ cannot even appear unless there is the beginning of the process of sharing between people and internationally. And we're a long way from that. We respond to disasters. It's painful to us, and that's one of the reasons we respond, but also just to help. But disasters don't occur every day, and the habit of sharing is not yet ours internationally. It will be apparent to you why the present period in which human beings in large groups can take the first initiation corresponds to a situation in which bread is the major interest of men everywhere. As a matter of fact, the slang word for money is bread, or one of the slang words, so it has to do with financial distribution on the physical plane in a creative way that will help the divine plan to manifest. So, there's the question of the haves and the have-nots, and people who have too much and people who are starving. It's a very unbalanced, unequal situation. So bread is of major interest, and some people are very, very selfish in their approach to it, and others are very philanthropic. It means you love humanity and you give of your resources. Humanity will pass through the birth initiation and manifest the Christ life on a large scale for the first time during the period of economic adjustment, of which the word bread is but a symbol. And that economic adjustment will be handled by initiates of the first degree on the seventh ray. He talks about a large group of initiates coming forth on the seventh ray, taking the first initiation, adjusting the financial distribution in the world. And remember, it's the age of Aquarius coming. It's the sign of distribution, just as the seventh ray is also associated with circulation. This period, it's a beneficent period actually. 1825 was an important year for a Shambhala impact and for welfare reform and all kinds of humanitarianism, competing with the blood and iron of Mars and the Black Lodge. This period started in the year 1825 and will continue until the end of this century. That's the 20th century. And, well, is it over? That's the question. Because we still have much to do in this 21st century and immediately before the onset of the age of Aquarius. The unfoldment of the Christ life as a result of the presence and activities of the second divine aspect of love, and we're still in a second ray 500-year cycle, and with the hierarchy and the Christ approaching, ruled generically by the second ray, there will be much of this second aspect of love available. So as a result of the presence of the second ray, this will result in an ending, the ending of economic fear, and the house of bread will become the house of plenty. Now, there are other things to read here, but I think that's enough to think about. The adjustment of our economic relations, and the house of bread will become the house of plenty. It's just, it's just heartbreaking to see how some people are forced to live. We don't know what karma brought them there, whether any karma at all, or whether it's just national karma or international relations. Anyway, they send their children out into the garbage dumps to find something, at least something to eat. And I'm sure it's not a very savory prospect, and I'm sure much that is brought back is not in good condition, but at least maybe some time on the garbage dump can keep people from starving to death. There are just heartbreaking pictures of what goes on in the famines of Africa, and it's just not right. And until we can get the proper kind of distribution going, well, until we can get that going, there's a lot of suffering. But let's just say man does not live by bread alone. That's true, but there must be a minimum of the bread, since bread is the staff of life, to sustain people so that they can at least live on the physical plane. And it's really our responsibility to make sure that every man, woman, and child on the physical plane is sustained by enough vitality simply to go on and maybe to have some kind of reasonable life. It's if we stop to think of it, it's pitiful. But okay, we can't stop with pity. I think Master Moria says pity is a puddle. If we don't do anything about it, it just exacerbates the situation and leads, says Master DK, sympathy alone, if not acted upon, will lead to sores and just the results of friction, and for the person who entertains it will lead itself to ill health. All right, those are some thoughts about money, about bread, about need, coming from Master DK. So when we think about what we might be able to give, and of course time is money too, as we know, a person who may not have the conventional resources, but who gives everything of time to the welfare of humanity is also engaging in the distribution of vitality. I think about some of these yogis and wise men and so forth. They don't have the conventional money, but they dedicate their entire life and their energy, the second house, you know, Taurus and so forth, vitality, they dedicate their energy constantly to the uplift of humanity. So let's enter our meditation now with those thoughts in mind and resolve to help with the right distribution of that which it takes, in our world anyway, to live. So let's first align. And we realize, try to realize deeply the truth of the statements, to those who give shall be given, so that they can give again. And the further extension of that idea, which has to do with the high initiations, to those who give all is given. It takes a great deal of trust, though, doesn't it, to act on that premise. And it takes a risk, a leap, because we want to be the ones who are for giving. He explains that's the real definition of that word. It's not pardoning, it's living a life for the sake of giving what you have. So with some degree then of soul rapport, that presence within us being registered by our consciousness, we ask ourselves some questions, and we answer according to the vision of the soul. As they say, before the bar of the soul, as if the judgment seat of the soul. If money is one of the most important things needed today for spiritual work, what is the factor which is at present deflecting it away from the work of the hierarchy? So we answer in our own words interiorly, according to our best insight. What is the factor which is at present deflecting it away from the work of the hierarchy? Now, as students of esotericism, we should know something about that. And help to adjust the perspective of those we work with so that the soul perspective can prevail and not the materialistic perspective. We go on. What is my personal attitude towards money? Am I handling it? Do I regard it as a great and possible spiritual asset, or do I think of it in material terms? Then, what is my personal responsibility in regard to the money which passes through my hands? As part of that question, am I handling it as a disciple of the Masters should handle it? And then for a moment we think about this hydra with 9 heads, one of which is the wrong use of money. It's one of the physical heads. And we imagine that Hercules here has a grip on that particular head of the hydra. There's so many reasons to use money incorrectly. It can be fear, it It can be egotism, simply a false sense of values, prestige, the love of, as it says, of giving material gifts. He points that out, many reasons, that we may be the victim of this head of the Hydra. So does it have any power over you, over me? Does it have any power? As we study ourselves honestly, what are these weaknesses related to the Hydra head of money? And can I lay a plan to overcome their power over me if such power exists? We have to remember the sequence when it comes to the invocation for adequate resources, and it's an unusual sequence. Use, demand, take. Use, demand, take. What we have to use aright. And then a vacuum is created, and within that vacuum we can demand the downflow of the resources needed to manifest the divine plan, and then we have to take, appropriate what descends and use it again in the right way. But we don't demand first and then use. It's the other way around. So this is one of the first and major tests of the disciple, the allocation of financial resources. And we notice how some of the masters have been very wealthy, but that's, Master M, Master R, Master KH, very wealthy. But why? Because they, in the lives leading up to their mastership, they followed the law with regard to the flow of financial resources. Now, we look out over humanity imaginatively and we ponder on the redemption of humanity through the right use of money. We visualize money as it is in the world today, as concretized energy. At present, largely used for purely material purposes and for the satisfaction, where the individual is concerned, of purely personal desires. Then we visualize money as a great stream of flowing golden substance passing out of the control of the forces of materialism into the control of the forces of light. Because surely money can be used for good or ill. We have so many examples before us, and we want to redirect that flow out of the dark into the light. And we say then the following invocative prayer with focused mental concentration and a heartfelt desire to meet spiritual demands. O Thou, in whom we live and move and have our being, the power that can make all things new, turn to spiritual purposes the money in the world. Touch the hearts of men everywhere, so that they may give to the work of the hierarchy that which has hitherto been given to material satisfaction. The new group of world servers needs money in large quantities. I ask that the needed vast sums may be made available. May this potent energy of thine be in the hands of the forces of light. Of course, it will happen, but the time equation is so much in the hands of humanity, and especially in the hands of disciples. And then we visualize the work to be done by those groups, those projects which claim our present allegiance. Any group which you know is attempting to carry out the hierarchical plan And there are, of course, so many groups we cannot, give to all, but we choose according to our inclination. And then through the creative imagination and by an act of the will, we see unlimited, untold, unlimited sums of money pouring into the hands of those who seek to do the Master's work. A true redirection of the resources by which we can create the divine plan on earth. And then we say aloud and with conviction and emphasis, He for whom the whole world waits has said that whatsoever shall be asked in His name, and with faith in the response, will see it accomplished. And as we do this, we remember that faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. That quotation, as we know, was used by Paul the Initiate. So many of us have to work on this faith in the response. Whatever shall be asked in His name, and with faith in the response shall see it accomplished. And then we ask the needed money. We say, I ask the needed money for, and then you fill in the group, the project, whatever current within humanity you believe is moving towards the expression of the divine plan and which you wish to support. I ask for the needed money for and I can demand it, because from the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. And then, in our creative imagination, we prepare to give our offering of resources, our money, our vitality, our time, to the Christ and to His emerging hierarchy. It is the pouring forth in sacrifice of what we have. Not only is it the only way to advance upon the path, but it's the only way to make the plan truly appear as it should upon the denser levels of manifestation. It's all bought through the law of sacrifice. And then we say together, as if in the presence of the Christ, we have gathered in your name, Lord Maitreya, be with us. And we offer in our imagination at first, and then in actuality, the money, the resources, the energy, the vitality, the time that we have saved, and we dedicate it to the Christ for the coming week. And we think, carefully consider our own responsibility to the divine plan. What is it that we can really contribute? The Masters got to be where they are because they contributed their whole life to making the divine plan real, everything they had. To those who give all is given, but not everybody is on the verge of becoming a master, and some can contribute financial resources as a great support for all the work that can be done and for all the work that they will do in coming lives. DK kind of warns us here. He says, be practical and realistic and know that if you do not give, you may not ask, for you have no right to evoke that which you do not share. we attempt to feel true love sweeping through us, and we have the fixed intention to express that love to all we contact. It is the great attractive and selfless agent in world affairs. We have to learn to blend the second and the third aspects of divinity. Venus will help us do that, and interestingly, Venus is so often the symbol, as the ruler of Taurus, for money. So we try to keep careful track. We keep our own bookkeeping. We decide what it is we can share, where we can share, why we share. And we resolve rhythmically to give what we can. To our chosen groups or organizations, those who work for the Christ. This is one of the first great tests of discipleship, and it seems to work on the physical plane, and it's one of the things that has to be worked out before a real externalization can occur. And now we will sound the Om 3 times, precipitating love into the worlds of the threefold personality. Friends, I want to thank you. Tuya and I wish to thank you, and all who are working together with the organizations that we try to help sponsor, the Seven Ray Institute, the Moria Federation, the University of Seven Rays, the Northern Light Society, the Blue Rose Sisters. You know, whatever we try to sustain in manifestation for the sake of the plan, we all wish to thank you for your presence, your meditation, and your support spiritually and tangibly. The next couple of days, we do not have the Ask program, but remember tonight Francis Donald's presentation on the secret doctrine starting at 8 p.m. GMT. We will now close with the Gayatri, the idea of the central spiritual sun pouring forth its entire life for the sustainment of the universe.
Spirit to us.